been charged with the murder as a child younger than 14. Prosecutors alleged that it really had nothing to do with Jeff Hall's role as a regional director for the nation's largest neo-Nazi organization, but more about the belief Joseph had that his family was about to be broken up and his desire to save his family from abuse. To further complicate the situation, 7 months after the shooting, Joseph changed his story, saying that his stepmother had been the first one to suggest murder. Though the defense seized on this, the prosecution didn't buy it, and she was not prosecuted for murder. She was instead arrested a few weeks later and ultimately received 120 days in jail and 4 years probation after pleading guilty to 1 count of willful child endangerment and 1 count criminal storage of a firearm. Due to starts and stops in the proceedings, the 10-day trial spanned months, culminating in a January 2013 decision of true to the charge of second-degree murder, the juvenile court equivalent to a guilty verdict made by a judge and not a jury. It took another 9.5 months to determine an appropriate sentence for the then 13-year-old who had been housed at the Riverside County Juvenile Hall since the murder almost 3 years before. His behavior did not improve in lockup, where he repeatedly fought with the other kids and with his female teachers. In November 2013, a hearing was held where the state prosecutor argued for a juvenile sentence that would see him incarcerated within the juvenile system until up to 23 years old, while the defense felt a residential treatment facility would be more appropriate, citing his, quote, very pervasive history of abuse as a very young child. The judge determined that the boy did pose a threat to the safety of society and sentenced him to up to 10 years in juvenile custody, likely seeing him released at age 23. At sentencing, the judge said, quote, he was abused and he was neglected from the womb forward, and this had to have had an effect on his thought process. His father's fascination with the NSM affected the minor and taught him things that children normally don't even think about. He learned that if you hit me, I will hit you, or as the minor said, if you want to kill somebody, you shoot them in the head. This is not a naive little boy unaware of the ways of the world. The minor had made trips to the border, shot guns, and knew about hate. But on this particular night, there was no screaming or yelling between father and son as there usually was. Father was on the couch asleep. In 2016, the Juvenile Law Center and the Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth joined forces and filed an amicus brief with the United States Supreme Court, hoping they would hear the case, which focused on whether the 10-year-old should have been allowed to waive his rights on his own. When the session began in October, the High Court quickly determined that the second-degree murder conviction would not be overturned and that the sentence he had been given would stand. It's shocking to contemplate how young some children are when bombarded with racist ideas. Kids who grow up immersed in such a culture may or may not continue it into adulthood, and many adults who embrace such ideologies stumbled upon it themselves, becoming radicalized online. They don't even need to officially be a member in any specific group. Just sharing the information is enough to have life-altering consequences. AtomWaffen Division was a Nazi extremist group birthed online who focused on a disdain for minorities, Jewish people, and the LGBTQ community, and encouraged lone wolf-style attacks to further the cause. It began as the idea of a teenaged Brandon Russell who ultimately joined the Florida National Guard to gain training for domestic terrorism. The term AtomWaffen is German for atomic weapons, and the group used the book Siege by a 1990s-era neo-Nazi figure named James Mason as their terroristic handbook. The man is an admirer of Charles Manson, and the pair corresponded for more than a decade. AtomWaffen Division members located James Mason after 15 years in seclusion, and they'd visit him in Colorado from time to time. Nicholas Giampa of Lorton, Virginia, had been attending the private Dominion School for kids with behavioral and emotional issues, and finally seemed to be adapting, or so his mother thought, because someone at the school told her that her son had a girlfriend. This feeling of normalcy was a long time coming for the mother, who had dealt with her son's behavioral issues ever since she was asked if he had access to bomb-making materials at home when he was only 7. He had told a friend he wanted to blow up their school. That began his pattern of changing schools 5 times until he landed at Dominion, and by then he barely spoke in public and was diagnosed at some point as autistic and suffering from depression and anxiety. His childhood was lonely, according to his mother's interview with the Washington Post, and he sometimes looked online at other boys his mom could adopt so he could have someone. Even with all the extracurriculars they placed him in and trips he was taken on, he only sunk deeper into despair. Nick did something that landed him in juvenile court and saw him banned from the internet in the summer of 2016. He had already been tweeting under an alias for more than 2 months, placing a great deal of emphasis on tweets regarding the civil war in Syria. He tweeted throughout the summer of 2016 up until November, and didn't begin tweeting again until June of 2017, right around when he began dating the girl. His girlfriend was the daughter of Fricker and Buckley Kuhn-Fricker, and the girl spent a good deal of time telling him about the issues she had with her parents. The first time she told her mother about Nick, she mentioned that he told her that Jewish people were partly to blame for the Holocaust. She seemed to think of it as her boyfriend being good at history, and the pair enjoyed a lovely summer of 2017. Buckley Kuhn-Fricker had a law degree and was the beloved and respected owner and operator of an elder care company in Virginia. She and her husband Scott were keeping a close eye on this relationship. Once school began, trouble was imminent because even the freshness of love can't fix everything. The emails about Nick Giampa began to fly within weeks, with the principal highlighting that he was struggling with his mental health, partly due to his court problems, but also due to his girlfriend's problems with her parents. The school felt that the teen's relationship was a high-risk situation, calling it almost Shakespearean. And though the juvenile court judge had restricted Nick from going online more than a year before, he had been back to social media with his alias and concentrated on propagating hate. His Twitter feed showed mostly retweets relating to AtomWaffen, of memes praising Hitler, and James Mason's book Siege, which the neo-Nazi organization had recently reprinted. He actively retweeted anti-Semitic vitriol and hate against minorities and the LGBTQ community from June to just before Christmas of 2017. His mother had no idea that Nick had been back on the internet since early that summer, nor that he had mowed a swastika into the grass near his home. Some neighbors were aware of it and later admitted that not addressing it had been a failed opportunity to maybe help change the direction of this child's life because it was clearly a tenuous situation. In the week before Christmas 2017, Buckley was shocked to discover the Twitter account she was certain was Nick Giampa's secret online alias. She composed an email to the Dominion School principal on Sunday, December 17th, detailing what she had found, saying, quote, "I would feel a little bad reporting him if his online access was to basically be a normal teen, but he is a monster, and I have no pity for people like that. He's spreading hate." And this was only phase 1 of her plan. 3 days later, she called Nick and told him that she knew he'd been sneaking into her house at night and not to see her daughter again. The Frickers told their daughter the same, that she was no longer allowed to date Nick Giampa. At home, Nick's mother said he was despondent over the new developments. He said he'd given up on trying to be happy and tried to explain to her that his girlfriend was in danger and that she didn't understand. He said he needed to save her. In the early morning hours of December 23, 2017, they laid together and she tried to comfort her son. He hadn't slept in 2 days, but she dozed, and when she awoke just before 4:30 a.m., her son was gone. He'd taken a gun, a knife, and the car keys she had hidden and gone straight for the Fricker home in Reston, Virginia. When she texted Buckley Fricker, the woman replied that he was there and that they were calling the police. They'd heard noises coming from their daughter's room and went to investigate. Though police arrived quickly, both parents had already been shot dead in their home full of extended family who had come to spend Christmas.
Caller advising her mother and father were shot. Caller is still upstairs with her boyfriend. Unit advising shots fired.
We're going to be upstairs, second level. This house isn't cleared yet. I think we have the shooter down.
Nick had arrived and went to his girlfriend's room and shot Scott Fricker as soon as he came in. Buckley was right behind him and was shot at the top of the stairs. Police arrived in time to hear Nick Giampa shoot himself between the eyes, a wound from which he would recover, but that would result in brain damage that factored into later diminished capacity. Following a bedside hearing on January 22, 2018, Nick Giampa was ordered transferred from the hospital to the Fairfax County Juvenile Detention Center. Soon after, he apparently wrote a friend a letter which included a confession, which police were made aware of that summer. He was mentally incompetent to stand trial for almost the next year after that, until May 2019, having spent much of that time in a psychiatric facility being treated. 4 months later, he was ordered to stand trial as an adult and is currently awaiting trial. His mother said that she wishes she learned more about his mental health problems because she admits to being aware that something wasn't right with her son. She attributed his online persona to a lonely child trolling, calling him, quote, broken down by years of isolation, bullying, and mental illness. She further contends, as defense attorneys similarly did in the Jeff Hall case, that conditions in the home, not alleged neo-Nazi beliefs, were the key to finding a motive for the violence. But unlike in the Hall case, it was issues in the victim's home that the shooter's mother said was his motivator and that he thought he was saving his girlfriend. In her interview, she remarked, quote, I wish it would have been us, not them. They truly didn't deserve it. It comes back on me. Nick Giampa was considered an AtomWaffen Division initiate, an entry-level rank whose numbers were greater than the actual members at the time. Several high-profile murders have been attributed to AtomWaffen Division associates, including the murder of Blaze Bernstein by Samuel Woodward in California, a crime praised in the underbelly of the World Wide Web. Even more shockingly, perhaps, were the murders committed by the group founder's right-hand man, 18-year-old Devon Arthurs, 6 months prior to the murder of the Frickers in Tampa, Florida. The neo-Nazi group wasn't even on the radar of authorities until Devon took 3 people hostage in a vape store after telling the employees in the office of his complex that he had just killed his roommates. No one inside the store was hurt, and after repeating his claim to police, Devon took them across the street to his apartment, and the dead bodies of 2 men inside, 22-year-old Jeremy Himmelman and Andrew Oneschuk, who had just turned 18. Both men had been shot multiple times in the head and chest at close range with an AK-47. The pair, friends who had met online through chat rooms and gaming forums, were from Massachusetts and had only been in Florida this time for less than 2 weeks. They'd become fast friends in real life. The last time they'd come down, their fourth roommate, 21-year-old Brandon Clint Russell, didn't have a very nice place for them to stay.